This video is about the slideshow for Chapter 12, which is Theatrical Reinterpretations. Chapter 12 is primarily about Europe and its rediscovery and reinvention of the Western classics. So back in Chapter 11, I talked about foundations of theater, including the Greeks and the Romans. Now, the Italian Renaissance brought about a renewed interest in those plays. In 1440, the printing press was invented, and that meant that written works like plays could be widely distributed. This was called the Neoclassic Age, or Neoclassicism, which meant that Italian Renaissance artists wanted to mimic the great art of classical Greek and Rome. Also, since much theater before this time emerged from religion, neoclassicism was an attempt to justify non-religious, or what we call secular, works. In this era, some books were published about stage effects and lighting, and as a result, 16th and 17th century Italy are known today for many advancements in the area of theatrical design. So we get perspective painting and complex stage machinery, and this creates lavish productions that focused on spectacle. Back in week 5 of this class, you'll remember that I shared with some of you this video of the Drottningholm Palace Theatre, which still to this day has the great proscenium or picture frame arch stage with the sliding flats coming out of the wings. And if you weren't in class on that day, check out the video here that I've linked to on this slide in case you missed it. Another notable development in this period was Commedia dell'arte, which I mentioned a few weeks ago when discussing genre. Over in England, the Renaissance came late because of political conflicts and wars. The English Renaissance, which is also called the Elizabethan Age because of the influence of Queen Elizabeth I, is one of the most prolific, most influential periods of drama the world has ever seen. Playwrights included Christopher Marlowe, Ben Jonson, and of course, William Shakespeare. So on this slide, I've listed all of William Shakespeare's plays. This is not in the chapter, but I'm adding a few things here because Shakespeare was just so influential. He's probably the world's most well-known playwright. Unlike his peers, however, like Christopher Marlowe, Shakespeare did not have a university education, and it's thought that many of his family, his mother, his father, his siblings, are all thought to have been illiterate. In 1623, after his death, 2 fellow actors published the text known as the First Folio, which was a posthumous collection of all of his dramatic works, and that was the first time they were all together in one space. Now, theater in Elizabethan England wasn't always one type of space. Okay? The same play could be produced in an outside playhouse. It could be in an indoor theater. It could be in a royal palace. If it was a company on tour, it could be the courtyard of an inn. But by the time Shakespeare started writing and having his plays produced, the spaces generally looked more like this. Audience members in Shakespeare's day paid a penny to stand in the uncovered yard of a playhouse or 2 pennies for a balcony seat. Now, the Globe Theatre, I'll move to that slide here, opened in 1599, and that became the playhouse where audiences first saw some of Shakespeare's best-known plays. In 1613, it burned to the ground when the roof caught fire during a performance, and then they built a new second Globe on the same site in 1614. In the Globe, spectators liked to drink wine or ale and snack on foods as they watched the plays. And actually, modern day excavations at the various playhouses have turned up bottles, spoons, oyster shells, the remnants of fruits and nuts. So we know that people were eating and drinking as they were watching these plays. Men and boys played all the characters, male and female. And acting in Renaissance England was an exclusively male profession. The stage itself was relatively bare, and for the most part, playwrights used vivid words instead of scenery to picture the scene on stage. Now, the Globe Theatre in the 1990s was reconstructed, or rather a reconstruction of the Globe Theatre was built in London, and it has since become a major tourist attraction. You can go there even now. This video that's linked on the slideshow on the bottom right here shows you what it currently looks like, and it gives you a glimpse of what it would have been like to attend one of Shakespeare's plays in Elizabethan England. So I will link to that on Moodle as well as in this slideshow here. Okay, Spanish theater was different in tone from the rest of European Renaissance theater in that the plays were both religious and secular. These plays were performed in restructured courtyards called chorales, which looked like the Elizabethan theater in many ways, as you can see here in this image. This golden age of theater in Spain lasted about 75 years, from 1575 to 1650. And theater at this point was an accessible art form for everybody in Spain because it was highly sponsored by the aristocratic class, and it was also highly attended by the lower classes. Now, over in 17th century France, we have French theater, which drew upon and popularized many of the innovations of the Italian Renaissance. So most companies performed in converted tennis courts, but some moved into really impressive theaters, and then they incorporated that elaborate Italian style scenery that we were looking at earlier. The most famous playwrights of this time period were Jean Racine and Molière. Molière was also an actor, and he was a manager of his theater company. He wrote farces and he wrote comedies of manners, and he wrote many plays that feature eccentric central characters. Restoration refers to the restoration of the monarchy in Great Britain. And this happened because from 1642 to 1660, theater was officially banned by the Puritans, who had taken over the English government. When King Charles II returned from France, there were important innovations in British theater. Because there had been such an absence, it was the influence of France that was more important than the memory of what had been in Elizabethan theater or Shakespeare's time. So the British ended up with more proscenium arches, more of these comedies of manners, and for the first time, women were now permitted to act on stage. Now, throughout the 1800s, melodrama, operettas, popular entertainment, and Shakespeare all existed side by side. And as we move to the Americas in the 1800s, we see that American theater was dominated by a group of businessmen called the Theatrical Syndicate. And that's what you're looking at here, these six men who had a monopoly of theatrical interests. And as a result, they were able to censor plays that they believed would not sell. As a result, innovation, European theatrical innovation, took much longer to come to the United States. But eventually, the syndicate's control was broken, and then we get the Little Theater movement in the early 1900s, which included Eugene O'Neill and also our playwright from Trifles, Susan Glaspell. Many of you working on your slideshows, if you're doing Trifles, already have noted her involvement with the Provincetown Players, and you may or may not have seen that was all part of the Little Theater movement. So she was, in addition to being the playwright for Trifles, she was also quite influential in the early 1900s. So what you're going to do at this point, after looking at this slideshow, is to click on the next link to view the video for Chapter 13.